the working class rising up. This is the ruling class punching down.
My day is bigger than your day.
First rule of gladiator school, bro. Don't punch down.
Charging into a goblin's Hail Trump!
The threat from outside forces is far less sinister, dangerous, and grave than the threat from within.
Control your own body.
We will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and the radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country.
We can fight the entire gambling system. Nobody can. But together, everybody can.
I did nothing wrong.
Hello and welcome to the Did Nothing Wrong Live podcast, the show that cuts through the noise and helps you make sense of the chaotic information space around us. I'm Griff Somke, and with me is Karl Folk. In today's episode, are Trump and Musk on the rocks? Plus, we have an on-scene report from this week's ICE raid in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Thanks again for your support. Keep listening to learn more, and remember, smash those like and subscribe buttons like Elon and Katie Miller. Karl,
I'm mad.
Speaking of Elon and Katie Miller, we saw what I thought at first was just an absolute kayfabed fight between Musk and Trump yesterday, and I'm still about maybe somewhat convinced that they might have staged this in advance. But I think things got a little out of hand.
Yeah, I'm not one to believe they actually staged this. I think this is two narcissists getting into a grappling match. And I think it's two people who have never in their life had to really back down from anything.
Right.
And so, this is a real interesting moment here, right? We have yesterday, I think, might have only been rivaled by COVID Day, right? The day
Trump gets COVID.
That's the only other day I can think of where it was like this. And I think, it's tough, right? We really want there to be some major rupture between these terrible fucking people and
Exactly.
some of the forces within the fascist backing. But I don't know how much this really matters. And the damage that Musk has done is just now we're just starting to see it. So Musk and Trump getting in a fist fight after Musk has killed upwards of 300,000 or 400,000 people due to his choices with Doge.
Exactly.
It's really, I don't know if it really matters in some ways. In other ways, yeah, this is a big deal. And I think the bigger, what I've been watching is to see who starts coalescing around Vance.
Right.
And, with Musk, as we've talked about, and as I've talked about extensively, both online and kind of in written stuff, the techno-fascist, neo-reactionary element that Vance kind of embodies, they're a huge threat. And I think, with Musk and Trump splitting, what I'm watching for is to see if we start to see some of that shift towards Vance. If we do, more publicly, I should say, because it's there privately, but more publicly, that would start to signal that something much larger has happened within the movement. We haven't seen any of that yet within the Republicans. We're starting to see a bunch of Democrats, though, start to say we'd love to have Elon Musk on our side. That's a separate, insane proposition that we will get to in a moment. But this thing, yes, I played rugby for a number of years, and I do
Democrat.
not have...
No.
Literally. I have played rugby for a number of years, and I don't have nearly the kind of CETE to, get behind this. So, this is terrible. And, so we have this fight, and...
So fucking stupid.
Trump...
So fucking stupid. He's the most hated man in America. He is honestly the most hated person in America. So what are you going to do? Bring him into the tent?
Well, we need to rehab him. Let's have him over for a good conversation about what we should do about immigration, right? No, the thing is, though, I think the fight more than anything, I don't think it's kayfabe. I think it's two narcissists getting in a pissing match. And I think, too, it's varying degrees of power, right? In what they want with their power.
Right.
And Trump is Trump. The motherfucker can't see past his own paintings.
No, he
Whereas
can't.
Musk can't see past his own paintings, but Musk's paintings are of him sitting on a pile of bones. And there's a real, I think as much as we want, this to be this massive coalition ending drag out brawl, it's not. And it's really tough because those two are going to fight like just the cattiest bitches Like, excuse me to all the catty bitches out there, but these two are gonna have you beat. And this is pretty standard, right? Like, we know for anyone who has watched any right-wing movement or
Yeah.
group ever, one of the mainstays outside of their core tenets of supremacy or whites, whatever it is that they infight like it is going out of business. And they do it in a way to assert their own power, to try and garner whatever they think they deserve. And that's what we're going to see here, right? Like with Musk and Trump, this is a much larger version of that. And Trump going out here and saying X, Y, and Z is one thing. Having Bannon, though, come out and say what he's now been saying for months more publicly, that he wants Musk deported and all this stuff. This is a really, tough place to be for people who want there to be some form of justice in the world, because now they're starting, we're just seeing the worst kind of shit come out of this, where people are like, well, we should deport people like Elon. And it's like, don't buy
go
into
down that road.
Don't
go
buy
down
into
that
that
fucking
right-wing
road.
lie just because you like the guy it's happening to. And, all of this, whether intentional or not, and I don't think a lot of it's intentional, it's giving people who are doing political calculus versus real world calculus space to really fuck things up. And we've seen that, right? And so the Republicans have this infighting issue. The wealthiest person in the world who's a fascist and has more bodies right now than some of the worst dictators we talk about historically already. That's not someone you rehab, and it's also not someone that we can't afford to say deport this person, strip them of their rights, do all this. As much as all of us would love to see that happen to the guy and see his businesses liquidated, if you give that to them for Musk, they'll use it against you.
They will.
And we have to be consistent in this. So this is just a disgust. This is just it's
It's absolutely shades of Vladimir Putin breaking the oligarchs in Russia when he took over. He did the same thing.
Yes.
Everybody who crossed him that was an oligarch either got killed, got nationalized, or got made to bend the knee.
Or all three.
He wasn't having that. And once the first couple got nationalized, well, the rest of them got on board because, who's going to stand up to him if Trump turns around and nationalizes Tesla?
Right.
That's the end of it.
Right.
SpaceX, Tesla, Boring Company, the whole thing, and puts Elon on the first boat back to South Africa. Who is going to ever stand up to Trump again after that?
Well, no one in the corporate world.
Nope.
And that's just it, right? Ultimately, something we've talked about extensively on this show, my focus is on tracing how power works, for itself, and then to function in other ways. And this is the example, right? The other night, as this was kind of unfolding, what I said to people kind of tongue in cheek, but also dead serious, is the night of the long knives was a night where, if we were looking at it contemporarily, people online would be cheering for Rommel, for these people to literally have been killed, right? And you would have people cheering from their opposition saying, this is, look at this, they're killing each other. This means their power is waning and they're going to lose control. And the reality is, no, that was a power consolidation tactic. I look at what happened here very similarly, right? Trump sees Musk as a threat. Trump understands that Musk's goals, while similar, are not the same, in that Trump doesn't hold power in Musk's vision.
Nope.
At least not true power.
Nope.
And that's, so what we're seeing is a consolidation move. Not some, it's also a petty, catty fight between narcissists and deeply broken people. But it's also, this other thing, right? And I think that we need to be very clear on that, especially when people like Bannon, when people within that sphere specifically have been saying very clearly and laying out very clearly that the way for Trump to consolidate more power, not just politically and economically, but socially, is to go after someone like Musk,
Mhm.
right? Like, they've been laying this out pretty clearly now since the election, not the inauguration,
The election, yeah. And if you find
And
yourself on the same side of an issue with Steve Bannon, you got to sit back and take a step back and ask yourself, record scratch, how did I get here? Because
yeah,
that's one of those things that you shouldn't agree with this guy very much. I mean, we've got freedom of speech here. We've got freedom of thought. You can do what you want. But if you listen to a lot of this podcast and you find yourself agreeing with Steve Bannon on subjects, you might want to think about that for a sec. Just sit
yeah,
with the idea of, why do I think this thing that Steve Bannon thinks is a good idea is a good idea?
yeah. And like, people really do need to understand, like, Bannon is a fucking Nazi.
Mhm.
Like, there's no, hyperbole in saying that. Like, Bannon's a Nazi. He believes in some of the more esoteric shit in kind of that side, but he's a Nazi, right? Like,
Right.
if you're bringing up what he's brought up over years as his inspiration and this, listening to someone like that is you're not you're on the wrong side. Sorry, guys. Like,
Yeah.
Bannon's a legit bad guy. And for the Republicans now to so clearly be following what appears to be his playbook on this, I think people really need to start thinking through, like, what that means in totality, because what Bannon's been talking about in conjunction with this is Nazi empire, right?
Yes.
Like, ultimately, the going after Musk and the wealth class in the way that Bannon wants to is the American version of what Putin did,
Mhm.
and what other far right and other authoritarians have done over the years to get complete control of certain sectors. And
Right.
so, like, this is, as much as everyone wants to follow the palace intrigue like it's fucking Survivor, that's kind of leading you in the direction that Survivor did, which is towards your couch and not towards the street. And that seems to be increasingly the point, is to get people to act and react to the,
Tune out
the
and watch the
reality,
show.
the reality TV show aspect of it versus the reality of
Right.
it. And that was we saw that with the Trump one, right?
Right.
But this is much more heavy.
Yeah. And let's not forget that regardless of whether Elon actually has, a position in the administration or not, let's not forget that Doge is still a thing. Let's
Oh
not
yeah,
forget that people like Big Ball still have jobs in the
yeah.
current administration,
Well,
and that
and
they managed to exfiltrate all of the data that they got. They have your information. They have your tax information. They have
well,
your
literally,
Medicare.
yeah, literally an hour before we sat down to record this episode today on Friday, June 6th, the Supreme Court came out and said that Doge is fully legally able to access all of the social security systems and all of our personnel data. That came out literally at, I think, about 4 o'clock East Coast time, so roughly about 3 o'clock Central, and about 1 o'clock
Fuck.
West Coast time.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so, the damage that Musk and the Republicans are trying now to make the appearance of not having done is going to now really start to become apparent, right? Like,
Yeah.
the damage at USAID internationally is becoming much more explicit, and the damage now that's been done at home is going to become much more explicit. That is a good reason to get into a fight with Musk. It's also a good reason for your media and your information and ecosystem to really play as much of all of it as they can to just keep people out of the loop. And the Democrats, their their social media environments fucked in a
Oh yeah.
very specific, different way, where everyone's stuck in conspiracy land.
Yeah. You've got the, for lack of a better phrase, blue and on
I mean,
people
it
that
is
we've
blue.
talked about on many
Yeah.
occasions that
Yeah.
cannot get off the idea that, hey, maybe some of these people are actually the Proud Boys. And,
Well,
seeing,
The question,
just
I mean,
being
I
honest,
asked
I
them,
asked that question, like, why are the ICE agents dressed in such a haphazard and sloppy manner? Where is
yep,
the unit discipline that you would
yep,
think that any kind of, even your average police department has that? Where are
yep.
these guys, like, basically dressed in their tactical fatigues getting it? And then, somebody responded to that with, oh, yeah, they pulled everybody off the desks.
That's, I mean, literally
That,
so
okay.
what we've seen and what continues to look to be true is that they are pulling people randomly from
Mhm.
across every agency they can and saying, "Here's your fucking gun, here's a
Right.
badge, here's your full combat gear, get in the fucking Bearcat," right? And
Yeah.
so that's a huge problem in its own right. And so we don't need, this is the problem right
Yeah.
now,
We do
right?
not need to make it out that these people are the Proud Boys.
They're not.
They're not.
I can tell you after what I saw this week in person,
No.
after dealing with the Proud Boys and dealing with various other extremists in person, nope,
Nope.
nope. These guys with guns actually know what the fuck to do, and they also don't, right? Like, it's that bizarre thing where it's obviously people who are hardened fucking trigger pullers, but they also have never done this in some cases in a capacity where it's domestic, and then
Yeah.
some cases they're not trigger pullers. They're guys who are like
Last week I was
running.
in an office pushing paper, and now I'm out in the streets.
Last week I was in the motor pool checking underneath cars with a fucking mirror to see if they have a bomb. Now this week I've got a bulletproof vest. Right. And that's the thing, right? Like, this environment is intentionally like this because authoritarians know that we're going to keep guessing who's who, who's what. That's not to say that there aren't some untoward things going on. That's not to say that the police as a, institution are not the racist and proto-fascist thing they are. These are all true.
And we talked a little bit about the important things that are still going on in the midst of this fight that ultimately isn't probably going to change a whole lot on one
No,
side or the other. And
no.
one of those things are that they've really started to step up the pace of the ICE raids. We
Yeah.
saw an article in, of all places, that lefty rag, the Washington Examiner, and I'm being very sarcastic because they're not,
No.
talking about how essentially Stephen Miller got up and dressed down the entire ICE staff saying, why are you not at 7-Eleven? Why are you not at Home Depot? Why are you not just filling trucks with these people?
Yeah.
Criminals? Fuck that. We're just going to load everybody who looks wrong onto, a
Yep.
boxcar and ship
Yep.
them off somewhere. And
Yep.
that's become the mentality that we've started to see out in the streets on the part of the ICE or whoever they are at this point,
Yeah. The federal forces.
whatever
Let's just.
federal bureaucracy is in charge of
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
at this point. That's what we're starting to see out there, is this sense of like, we need to just round everyone up.
Yeah.
And this week it happened in Minneapolis,
Yep.
and you were there.
I was.
So
I
walk me
was.
through the situation. Walk me through how this got started.
So Tuesday morning, I was working here at the house, and as per the usual for a media addicted, online researcher, I have a window open to blue sky, and it's, kind of my normal morning feed. And I a couple things where it was just like, look, this is weird. We don't know what this is. And then about maybe an hour after the first thing I had seen, someone was like, look, there are Bearcats um,
Whoa.
sitting at the corner of Bloomington and Lake Street, which is, if you don't know Minneapolis, this part of Minneapolis is the Latino heart
Right.
of Minnesota, and it's a huge population of a number of groups from all over Central South America, from Mexico, from, just kind of this broad swath. And it's about 3 blocks away from Mercado Central, which is a huge, like the
Yeah.
huge Mexican market in that part of town. And it was in front of a restaurant and kind of I guess, an entertainment space. But they serve taco, kind of traditional fare. And Yeah, I gotten a notice like, "Hey, there are Bearcats here. There are guys with long guns, and we don't know who they are. They're wearing face masks."
Yeah.
Which, at like 11 on a Tuesday morning when it's raining, you're like, "Well, shit.
Yeah.
I gotta go." So I went, I got my gear together. I got my camera and all my rain gear and my press badge and all that, and went down there. And I got down there about 30 minutes after "Hey, there are Bearcats here."
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I walked about a block from where I parked up to where this is all kind of going down. And at that point, I would say there were 250 people protesting against a number of very, very masked, very much anonymized federal forces. And there were members, when I first got to the front to start taking photos, start talking to people in the crowd, these guys were all wearing garters on their face, some American flags, some thin blue line, some just black garters. But they were all, this was a fully militarized force. They were carrying assault rifles that were suppressed. Some were carrying pepper impact rifles. Some were carrying tear gas launchers.
Right.
Um, and, none of them would identify themselves. None of them would identify what their badge numbers were and names. So getting there, it was pretty hectic already by the time I got there. And, within, I would say 20 minutes of me getting there, the numbers doubled
Sure.
in opposition of them. And, it was raining and pretty loud. And, there were a couple different, the larger protest group had broken up to kind of stand in front of the building and protest those guys with guns. And then in the back of the building where it looked like they were going to lead people out. And they had a number of vehicles staged, black Sprinter vans, white vans, city vehicles, the Bearcats, undercover vehicles, the whole, everything you see in the militarized police state of post 9/11, right?
Yeah.
And so, that's one thing. But the federal officers, the federal forces were absolutely, um, I would say they were totally, without any hesitation, willing to both antagonize the crowd and put their hands on the crowd, which I have seen many times from Minneapolis PD because that's what local cops here do. It's far different when you have federal troops that the city is saying they don't know we're there and that, kind of just appeared out of the woodwork, as it were,
Sure.
in a full
Sure.
kind of battle capacity. For them to start really manhandling people, myself included, as someone they're filming in a citizen journalist capacity, that's a problem.
I want to
Um,
bring this back to one thing that you managed to capture in some of your photography of the event
mhm,
and some of the other people that took pictures that ended up online with this. It's become a common thing for police officers, for ICE folks to cover up identifiers on a badge, to tape over like a badge number or a name or whatever. And they say, well, we don't want to get doxxed. We don't want that on the internet. We don't want people knowing who we are. And as un American as that absolutely is, it
yes,
makes a certain amount of sense because the doxing is a tactic that their side has used quite effectively on
yes,
other people.
yes,
But this had something different to it. These guys had patches that said the others, and
yep.
there were multiples of these people wearing that.
Yeah, so when I first found that photo in my larger spread of photos that I'd taken of these name tags, I knew that people needed to see it because what I
Yeah,
had seen, like walking through, what you really realized is you would see some sort of military patch, whether that was some incredibly suspect racist runes,
oh, yeah, the
um,
runes for the what was it?
or
Yeah, that was
yeah,
frightening.
the Special Operations Task Force out of St. Paul that has the Nordic runes and the skull.
The
Yeah,
skull
that's a
Odin.
problem. That's
Okay,
a problem. Yeah.
okay.
But then
Not
you
all
start see
Odinists and all, but this bunch of Odinists I gotta wonder about.
Definitely not all, and this definitely not all pagans, but this patch really screamed one kind of specific rune usage, and it's the same kind that ended up on collars in a certain European country
Yes.
for about a decade. Um, no, that though, that's all one thing. Like anytime you're at a militarized protest like this, where there are troops involved, you're gonna see morale patches.
Sure,
That's one
sure.
thing,
That's the thing.
and that's not great. That's actually a problem. But this is the first time I everyone I've talked to numerous researchers kind of at all levels, both on the anti-fascist side, on the police side, and on the like, I just like patches and I know a lot about them crews, kind of the
Mhm.
concentric rings. No one knows what they are. No one's
Right.
ever seen them. I've never seen them. And yeah, every one of the individuals that I saw in person and both on film and in photos replace their name tag with something that just says the others.
Right. And I
Um,
saw at least 4 photos of separate people from that incident,
yes,
and they were
yes.
all wearing that same patch with the same
Yep.
font and the
Yep.
same lettering. It was
And
clear that, like,
it's a rubberized embroidered kind of thing.
sure, sure.
And so
This wasn't some
this is
homemade shit. This was something you absolutely had to go get made somewhere.
and that's the question, right? Like I think, for a lot of people don't think about the fact that they're like sheriff's gangs all over the
Yeah.
country.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
LA County Sheriff's Office, wherever. This has that feeling, but some sort of interagency thing. No one can get a good answer, and we've been asking myself and a couple of the other people who were there. I know for me, since I was the first one to kind of bring those photos into the public, I asked prior to putting them up a number of people who I've gone to for this kind of sourcing before. None of us have seen them. We've
Yeah.
all seen, like in 2020, something that we saw here a lot was the thin blue line being deployed over a
Right,
badge.
right. They put a piece of blue tape, they go to the
Yep.
store, they get some
Yep.
blue painter's tape or blue just, electrical tape, and they put the
Yeah.
blue line over the badge, and when someone asks, it's like, "It's a tribute to our fallen comrades." Do you believe it? Nah, kinda, maybe. Not necessarily. Not great,
Yeah.
but that makes a certain amount of sense. The others is going
This is
into
something
territory that is like, we are now a gang. We are some kind of established
Yeah.
faction within the law enforcement community that has
Right.
banded together for some kind of purpose. And I'm emphasizing this because I want people to understand exactly how bad this is. Because
Right.
this
Well, and
is not
yeah.
fucking good whatsoever.
Well, and if this is some sort of organization within an interagency capacity, and they're calling themselves the others, and they're acting outside of all, kind of
Right.
agency norms, and they're being tasked with what appear to be kind of ad hoc agency cooperation and all this shit, and deputizing people on the ground in real time, which is what we kind of saw, right? Like
Yeah.
some of these people were sheriff's deputies from outside of the city. Some were police officers, federal officers from X, Y, or Z. Some, so this is a totally new thing from both the federal level and the name tag, though, is concerning because, is this some sort of, is this the question I keep asking is, are we seeing the emergence of some sort of interior interagency force
Right.
that doesn't appear on paper and doesn't exist outside of some sort of, slush fund budget?
Right. Like, is this the start of some group that's making themselves into an inner circle group? Kind of, the way the SS were the inner circle group for the Nazis.
Well, and that's, I think the closest analogy I would use is something like the shoot stuff, right?
Yeah.
The concern is this is some sort of secondary parallel force within
Right.
the regular forces.
Is it official? Is it not
Right.
official?
And these
Where'd
are
this
all the
come from?
questions. Yeah, and these are all the questions I've been asking since kind of, hell, it's been a long time since I've had someone pull a fucking full-on taser on me for asking questions.
Gotta love freedom of speech in America.
Right. It's been 5 years since I've had a federal troop put their hands on me and literally move me out of the way. I think the thing that for me was the most apparent is just this is now they are the blunt tool and this is the hammer approach much, right? And like this is always the thing that I think a lot of activists and others really warned about with, you know, the war on terror framing of militarized police is like the reason we don't there are a lot of reasons we don't use the US military domestically. One of them though is like they are a hammer and hammers only see nails,
Yeah.
right? And
When
like
you are a hammer, every problem looks like a
everything's a
nail.
nail. Yeah. And so in this case, like if we have a militarized police force, whether or not it's some secondary parallel interior force or whatever, but that's willing to use that counterinsurgency, war on terror mindset for everything, all of law enforcement breaks down
Right.
because the argument in the city right now is, oh, this wasn't ICE, the city didn't know, the city wasn't helping them. It's all bullshit.
Yeah.
But they're hiding behind the fact that like this was HSI, right? So Homeland Security Investigation.
Right.
Well, Homeland Security is ICE. ICE owns a huge part of the infrastructure to give itself the credibility it needed to maintain itself in the 23 years that it's been in 22 years, excuse me. It's been around, but it's still ICE.
Mhm.
And the semantic game, this shit is not helping anyone when the reality is we're dealing with this blunt object now that's going to come in
Right.
and use terror as a form of social control. And, I think watching it unfold here, people are scared,
Yeah.
but they're also losing that fear. And watching someone write "Don't come back" on a fucking Bearcat while they're surrounded by guys with M4s and with other
And let's be clear, just in case our audience isn't aware of what a Bearcat is, it is a military attack vehicle. Mm-hmm. That big
with
thing in the video, the big
Yeah.
tank looking thing. Yeah, it's a Bearcat.
That's a Bearcat.
Mhm.
And those are normally used to quell terrorism, right? Like this is all what happens when you bring your tools of war back from your war zone. And so people are scared in the sense that this is really fucking destabilizing and the fear in the neighborhoods is palpable. But they're also losing that fear of reaching out. And I think, if at 11:30 or noon on a Tuesday when it's raining in Minneapolis and enough people come out that like they're deploying bear spray and people are starting to throw, concrete benches into the city streets in front of Bearcats to stop them from escaping
Yeah.
the crime scene. That should tell people about the resolve of what these people are going to be up against, especially as it gets worse. And I think for a lot of us, we want this to end in a way where we're not going to have to confront some of the truths we have to confront. But the reality is, this is what we were fighting against in 2020.
Yeah.
This is what George Floyd in part was trying to stop, was the flagrant push from policing into military terror against all of us. It's so tough. So many people want this to be some aberration that Trump caused. When the reality is, this is what American policing has always been.
Right.
It's a maintenance of white supremacy and white power, not maintenance of rule of law and the hope that it's helping the general population. And that reality is only going to become more stark, and it's going to require people to really understand that like the way we've thought about this, whether it's regular community policing to what we see now as Gestapo raids on our neighbors,
Yeah.
that's been the heart of this since its inception. And to really move past this in the future, when we do have a democracy again, when we have the ability to do the reconstruction we have to,
Yeah.
we have to understand that because we can never do this again. And American white supremacy in policing is our history, and it can't be our future
No.
because it literally is Trump. it literally is the fascist urge, and we can't do it anymore.
And we have seen people push back on this. We have the next day in Chicago, there was another series of raids, and the community came out and surrounded them and pushed them back.
Yep.
Today, right now, as we're recording this in Los Angeles, there is a series of raids going on, and people are out protesting this. There is an emergency protest going on in Los Angeles right now as a result of these raids.
I mean, hell, video released 2 hours ago shows ICE agents pulling guns on someone's daughter.
Yeah.
Who they had just disappeared their parents.
I don't know my dad. He's not a criminal. He's not a criminal. What you doing?
Get back!
Why? Why? Just say why?
This is going to escalate as these people become more emboldened and told by Miller to hit their fucking quotas.
Yeah.
They're going to get into a situation that's no win for anyone. Like that video today of that agent pulling a gun on a woman who was 6 to 10 feet away, and in any case, like if you or I pulled a gun in the way this guy did with no threat, with the person out of any kind of length, that's a brandishing charge minimum. They're gearing up to treat us as a domestic enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And what the reality is in doing that is solidifying that the real enemy to the people are the ones wearing ICE badges and HSI badges.
And patches that say the others.
Yeah, sorry. If you're the others, you're automatically the fucking bad guys. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, have you thought about this for any length of time? You're not.
Like yeah, you and I talked as I was coming home from that. And like I jokingly said, did I just have a run-in with the secret police? I've had a couple days to think about it.
Where's the joke?
Yeah. So I think, I think this is the thing. We're now in a cycle where it's going to be acceleration and reaction. And these people are incredibly fucking brittle. Like watching a guy in full, and I mean full battle gear, ready to go into urban combat like it's fucking modern warfare, getting so rattled by people telling him that he's going to end up at a Nuremberg that they start putting their hands on people. Excuse me. But you're soft as baby shit, dude. You've got a fucking level 4 body armor set on. You're carrying an assault rifle. You've got 2 sidearms. And you've got 19 of your fucking gang friends.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm like, if you're so soft that a bunch of people telling you you're doing wrong makes you start putting your hands on people, we already won.
Yes.
Like, that's the thing. Like, if we control you into twitching and doing your shit, well, have fun with that, dude. Like,
yeah,
it's one of those things. It's really, it's so gross to watch in real time as these things are happening. But on the ground, that crowd was fucking with each other. They were talking to each other. They were trading info, and they were also together fighting one group of people. And that, you got yourself a problem if you're opposing that. Let's just say that.
You're on the wrong side. You're absolutely on the wrong side of that argument.
And you have to think they know it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the way these guys were reacting in some cases, you can never know what someone's heart is, but you can definitely see when people are starting to have the bigger picture roll in front of their eyes. And, that's a sense that you got, at least in some cases, especially when Minneapolis police showed up much later than they said they did.
Right.
You could tell that, like, we can't do anything, they can, and they're trying to get us out of here. Like, that's there's a dynamic that you can kind of pick up on there. So it's interesting to see, because you can also tell that, like, the city, I don't think really actually did know what the fuck was going on, which is concerning in a real fundamental way.
Right. And I think we're going to see more of that. But at the same time, we're seeing every one of these raids get met with an aggressive response from the citizenry of the town.
And increasingly so. Yes.
And I really, I'm even more convinced than I was last time we talked about this, that this is an absolute recipe for something really bad to happen. You've got these extremely twitchy ICE agents that don't necessarily have enough field experience to really be out there doing what they're doing. They're walking around with automatic weapons. They're walking around extremely on edge because they're not used to this kind of thing at all. They've got
Yep.
people throwing stuff at them. They're calling them names. They're telling them to get the fuck out. They're, basically in this stress situation that they haven't really trained adequately for. I think it's a matter of time until one of these guys loses his temper and shoots somebody.
Well, that's my concern, right? And like, if history teaches us one thing, it's like bad things, like the really bad things that can happen in these kind of cycles, sometimes are accidents, right? Like the fear I have is of accidental escalation, right?
Yeah.
And that's what this would be. Like, I don't think we're going to get a Kent State where you have an officer go out and tell every one of his ICE, his ragtag bunch of federal troops to start shooting. But there's a much higher probability that Johnny Desk Duty,
Yeah.
who's out for his first time with an M4, flips it to 3-on-3 and lets a volley go into a crowd and someone
Right.
fires back.
And that's what I'm terrified about.
And that's my concern, because that's how escalatory situations actually happen generally in a lot of cases, right? Like, it's not always that you need to shoot that protester,
Yeah.
from on
Yeah.
high. It's, oh, Johnny accidentally pulled the trigger and now there's return fire and now we have, right? Like, now it's rules of engagement. Now you're in a shit show.
Uh-huh.
And, like, that's how truly heinous things happen.
Yeah.
Is Johnny Desk Duty pops off 3 rounds into a crowd, and then,
The crowd reacts badly.
the crowd reacts by someone on a rooftop firing 200 rounds.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then 30 other guys start firing. I mean, this is how this shit happens, right? Like, and escalation spirals are always dangerous because of this kind of thing. It's much more likely that you have an accidental escalation towards a place that is almost impossible to de-escalate from.
Yes.
Than the other way around. You're not going to have someone accidentally hand a fucking cop a Pepsi and suddenly the riot's over. Sorry to the Jenners. Sorry to PepsiCo.
That's unfortunate.
That's not how this works. It's much more likely it goes the other way, right? And so, like, that's my concern. And I said it earlier today. The more times this happens, the more of these raids and federal troop actions happen, the higher that likelihood gets that we get into a situation where Johnny Desk Duty pops off and suddenly Derek, with his fucking lifted truck, puts 100 down range.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're getting into a place where that becomes more likely. And frankly, like, everyone's, I get all these messages every day like, well, but this is what the Republicans want so they can institute martial. No, if they want to do martial law, they're going to fucking do it. That's a different argument than Johnny Desk Duty accidentally starting an escalation spiral that ends with like 6,000 or 7,000 people getting into it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you can't walk that back. Honestly, having lived through WTO protests in Seattle in 1999, I'm here to tell you that once that kind of genie is out of the bottle, the people were fighting the cops for a week up on Capitol Hill every single night.
Yeah, toothpaste does not go back in the container when you jump.
No.
Sorry.
And it contributed to a lot of the bad feelings that persist to this day that led to, the idea of let's go ahead and declare a 4-block stretch of this city an autonomous zone. Let's build CHOP or Chaz, whatever we decided to call it at the end. And a lot of that comes down to the idea of people are still mad about 1999 up here in 2020 when that's happening.
These are all untreated wounds of history, right?
Yeah.
Like, I could literally start a podcast that's just called like Wounds, because realistically we're dealing with a bunch of sepsis from across our history on the body politic and the social body, right? And like, Trump is a symptom of those as much as a driver, and some of our other problems similarly fall into both places as well, but like this is where we get into the true, like, we start spiraling away from just the America's intrinsic proto-fascist white supremacist base to like the extermination strategy.
Right.
And I
Right.
think that for any of us who've done work researching the far right or dealing with this, it's starting to get, I think, scarier in that it's starting to reflect a lot of the things that they've talked about for 30 years. And not just in the like, we're going to do this and this thing to this group, but more the structural and infrastructure gains of building a fascist world.
Right.
And like, I think more and more about that that infrastructure in regards to things like the others and these what could be interior groups and the infighting around Musk and Trump. This is all the what we're talking about today really is about the symptom of authoritarianism versus the reality of it. And
Yes.
that's the really tough part, right? Because like this unreality state that we're all living in now isn't about anything beyond power and those who have it. And so we're just in a different, like we all keep saying it's a different world. There's democracy's gone. This is kind of what that is.
Right. We've moved from theory to practice at this point.
We're in the classroom now.
Right.
Right? Like we're teaching now. It's not a bunch of us trying to be in a room and teaching lectures. It's, well, now everyone's in the classroom experiencing it, so we have to deal differently. I think overall Americans are starting to get it. I think it's slow, like I've been saying forever. America's slow as shit to move, but once we do, we do. Most Americans aren't down. Like
No.
we've seen that.
No.
The reporting, like the actual numbers are with that. And I just, there's so much that's about to start kind of hitting in incremental waves here, whether it's tariff stuff, whether it's the pricing that you're seeing at the grocery store, or whether it's the fact that we're going to start to have real issues with supply chain stuff.
Yeah.
These things are all going to start to feed on themselves versus us trying to figure out what part of this democratic process isn't going to work. It's, for a lot of people, it's going to be, how do we do this and this and still have enough money left over to pay for electricity? And
Right.
that just changes the whole dynamic so much in regards to these other things that like we're gonna be in a shifting sands situation here for a bit.
Yeah. So really the best thing to do is try to keep as cool as possible, I think. Try to learn as much as you can tolerate about what's going on and the history of what has gone on.
Yeah, no, I mean, the best thing you can do right now is get very clear on the history of this, because it'll make it a lot easier for you to say, why the fuck are you lying to me? To someone saying, well, this guy is wearing a garter and that looks like the Proud Boys. And it's like,
Right.
no, it's just that the cops are the Klan. This has kind of been our, like, there's literally a saying for this for a fucking reason, guys.
The Proud Boys are a sideshow at this point.
They're something, but they're not the game.
Right. This is not what we're talking about. That's not who these people are.
No, and like Proud Boys is as intense as they can be, and you've seen them in real life in the same way I have, right? Like very much in your face. They're a very intimidating force. They though are not the same kind of like, oh shit, you're kind of a tree trunk motherfucker that some of these federal officials definitely are. And like, I have family members who are military. You can kind of tell when a guy's like the military.
Oh yeah.
Or was the military versus being like, I was in the military and now I'm this.
Right.
And in this case, I think people just need to remember the information environment is going to dictate your real one now. And that sucks for all of us, but that means the better you are at understanding what's real and what's not in that space, the more you're going to understand about what's actually happening in front of you.
Definitely.